Today, we're going to be looking at my 25 most anticipated board games of 2024. My name is Nick Murray, and you are listening to the Bitewing Games podcast. We know so little about the planned board game releases of 2024, and yet it is already shaping up to be a killer year for gaming. Predictably, in assembling this list of my most anticipated games of 2024, a lot of these titles come from creators that I closely work with as a publisher and/or that I obsessively follow as a fan. So don't be surprised to see titles from Reiner Knizia, Bitewing Games, Allplay, and the like. If I had a crystal ball, then there would be loads more titles on this list from other publishers and creators who have not yet revealed their secrets. But regardless of my personal ties to them, I'm genuinely stoked for these 25 games, and today I'll tell you why. The following 25 titles are games that I have already pre-ordered, plan to order, or are even games that I have already played and am simply excited for their official release when I can enjoy them further and bask in their final production. For your information, this list is roughly arranged in order of expected release date. So here we go with the first of my most anticipated games of the year, Marabunta. Marabunta is expected to release this month, January 2024. And it sounds like a very different kind of roll and write game where two players duel it out on a shared area control board via an I split, you choose mechanism. And it is designed by Dr. Reiner Knizia. Say no more. Next hotly anticipated game, Heat, Pedal to the Metal, the Torrential Rain expansion. This one has an expected release date of the first quarter of the year. Better buckle up, the hottest hotness of recent years, Heat Pedal to the Metal, is expected to get an expansion in the early part of this year. It introduces two additional tracks, the Japanese Grand Prix and Mexican Grand Prix, with new features like puddles, new air intake improvement upgrade cards to help with cooldown, a new tournament season, and an orange racer to allow for a 7-player game. Another hotly anticipated title, City of the Living, expected to release in February of this year. The team behind Nightmare Productions is back with another Knizia re-implementation in City of the Living. Originally printed in 2013 as Prosperity, where the old version had players balancing global prosperity across impending pollution, this new version poses the challenge of rebuilding society in a post-apocalyptic world amid an onslaught of zombie invasions. Either way, I'm excited to see what this economic game, co-designed by Reiner Knizia, is all about. Another game I'm looking forward to, Captain Flip, which should release in February of this year. New publisher Playpunk and their debut release, Captain Flip, have a promising team at their helm. The company is founded by Antoine Bauza, designer of Seven Wonders, Hanabi, Takanoko, Ghost Stories, and more, and Thomas Provost, co-founder of Repost Productions, known for publishing many of Bauza's most famous works. And this game is designed by Paolo Mori of Ethnos, Libertalia, Dogs of War, Blitzkrieg, and Remo Consadori of Three Ring Circus and Rise. With that kind of pedigree behind Captain Flip and the premise of quick push-your-luck decisions, I'm fully interested in this family weight filler. Another game that should release in roughly March of this year, Skyrise. And it's hard to believe, but I backed Skyrise way back in June 2022. It seems that the extensive plastic components caused a significant delay in the production and delivery of this area majority, auctioning, city-building game. But the good news is that production is finally wrapping up, according to publisher Roxley, and expected to begin freight in early 2024. Roxley has had their hands full with so many spin-offs and expansions and sequels of their other IPs that Skyrise represents their first new IP since 2021's Radlands, if you can count this re-implementation as new. Another hot game on my list, Cascadero, which is expected to release by the second quarter of this year. And this is notably published by yours truly, us here at Bitewing Games. One reason why Reiner Knizia is a legendary game designer is due to his killer offering of tile placement games featuring light rules yet heavy strategy. His most famous titles in this genre include Tigris and Euphrates, Through the Desert, and Samurai. And 2024 marks the latest entry into this list of legends with the release of Cascadero, a brand new Knizia design. The thing that makes Cascadero unique is the opportunity to set up and execute supremely satisfying combos while competing on a shared map. And it's worth noting that for all of the Bitewing Games titles that are mentioned in today's list, these are available for pre-order on our web store, so you can follow the link in the description of this podcast if you would like to reserve a copy. Speaking of which, another one published by us, Cascadito, also expected to deliver at the same time as Cascadero, roughly the second quarter of this year. Cascadito is the companion design and spin-off game to Cascadero. You can enjoy one or the other or both, as they each provide distinct experiences. The sensation of linking towns on a map which triggers combos along tracks is still present here, yet everything else is quite different from Cascadero. Players take turns drafting from the dice pool to fill in map spaces and advance up tracks on their own sheets. And the box offers 4 wildly unique sheets to explore and revisit. This one can be played in a shorter amount of time, features a solo mode, and is generally less in your face with the player interaction than its larger sibling. Another hot game for me, Arcs, which is expected to release by the second quarter of this year. The legendary team behind Root and Oath, also the designer of Pax Pamir 2nd Edition and John Company 2nd Edition, are finally releasing their next big box epic. This time rooted, in a futuristic sci-fi setting, where Oath requires a much larger commitment from its participants, namely one huge rules teach with regular 2 or 3 hour play sessions thereafter. Arcs aims to provide a similar experience while being a bit more approachable and narratively disciplined. You can either do a one and done 90-ish minute play session with the more affordable base game box, or a 3-act campaign with the huge expansion box, which is still less of a commitment than Oath. Next title for me, Through the Desert, the Bazaar expansion. Expected to release in the second quarter of this year. Notably, this all-play Kickstarter will be delivering at the same time as our own last 2 Kickstarters, Spectral, Trailblazer Sasquatch, Cascadero, and Cascadito. So any of these items that you have backed or pre-ordered, you can expect them to arrive at the same time. So Through the Desert has long been a stone-cold classic of board gaming. Now that it's getting an updated version from Allplay, they are also providing a few brand new expansion modules in this Bazaar expansion, most of which are ideas from Reiner himself. These modules introduce things like special watering holes that replace regular point tokens, bazaars that encourage connections between 2 points, genies that change up the camo placement rules, and more. So I just mentioned them, but the 2 next games on my list are Spectral and Trailblazers the Sasquatch expansion. Again, these are all coming out roughly the same time. That's why we're going through them all right in a row. But regarding Spectral, we've seen a lot of interesting logic deduction games in recent years with titles like Search for Planet X, Turing Machine, and Cryptid. But this genre is typically weak on player interaction, aside from racing to find the ultimate solution first. Spectral aims to offer a refreshing experience by cranking up the player interaction and bringing more nuance to the deduction puzzle. Treasure hunters enter a haunted manor to discover and deduce the locations of gems and curses. Then they compete for area majority around the most valuable rooms. All of this culminates in an exciting climax where players discover which rooms are cursed and which rooms dole out the most treasure. As for Trailblazers the Sasquatch expansion, well, Trailblazers is one of our most popular titles yet, thanks to its approachable route building, charming portability, and surprisingly puzzly depth. It released last year alongside far more expansion and solo mode content than most players will ever have time to fully explore or master. Rather than simply pile on more challenges or content, this year we've opted for something truly different. Trailblazers Sasquatch expansion is probably the most weird and wacky game we've ever published, and that's including our many yet unrevealed titles. That's because this expansion turns a fairly low interaction private map game into a high interaction cooperative experience on a shared map with the potential for a hidden traitor being the secret Sasquatch. Where Trailblazers is easy to plop down in front of 1 to 8 new players, the Sasquatch expansion only plays 2 to 4 players and is best experienced with the same group across multiple sessions to enjoy an evolving meta. And finally, the last game I'm hotly anticipating among this huge batch of titles that are going to release from both us and Allplay at the same time is A Message from the Stars, published by Allplay. And perhaps this is just a personal problem, but I can't seem to wrap my head around the premise of any logic deduction game from a general overview. That's at least the case with A Message from the Stars, and I imagine that's the case for folks who hear about our own Spectral. This genre just seems to be one of those things where you have to play it to get it. But I'm definitely interested to check out this cooperative word-based logic deduction challenge. In A Message from the Stars, the alien player and scientist players transmit and decode each other's messages. Speaking of aliens, the next game on my list is Galactic Renaissance, also expected to release in the second quarter of this year. And if you weren't around or following us back then, I actually had the chance to play and preview this sibling design to Inish back when it was initially crowdfunded. And now, within a few short months, it'll finally be delivering to backers. But if you want to check out my Galactic Renaissance preview, then you can head over to bitewinggames.com and type in Galactic Renaissance in the search bar. In Galactic Renaissance, the drafting of Inish is replaced by deck building, and the King of the Hill competition is replaced by a combo-tastic race. But one can still recognize that these area control games both come from the same designer. After enjoying my preview plays, I am looking forward to seeing this one in its final polished form. Another game releasing in the second quarter of this year, Age of Rail South Africa. The next title in the Iron Rail series will finally pull into station. This series maintains several common traits, including auctioning for shares, building up railroads across a map, sharing incentives with your rival investors, learning the game on a single sheet of paper, and sometimes sabotaging your own company to hurt opponents more than yourself. I don't know much about what makes this particular title unique other than the action selection system, which sounds a bit like worker placement. Actions can be blocked off to others until that player relocates to another action. Now, the second quarter of this year is still going strong with this next expected release, Things in Rings. Ever since I sampled Things in Rings at a recent convention, I've been hungry to play it more. This quick party game has players racing to empty their hand of item cards by taking turns adding one item at a time to a Venn diagram overseen by the Knower. This special player facilitates the game by knowing the logic rules for each ring and accepting or rejecting each item that gets placed within or outside of the diagram. If your object is accepted, meaning you placed it in the proper position, then you are one card closer to winning the game. If it is rejected, then the Knower repositions it to the correct spot, and you must draw a new card into your hand from the deck. Over time, players will deduce the logic rules of each ring and hope to clear their hands first. Assuming it lives up to that alluring first impression and the delightful concept art that I've seen so far from Allplay, then Things in Rings is poised to become one of the best party games of 2024. Speaking of party-style hits from Allplay, another one I expect will be Fairy. Much like the recent dumb fun hits such as That's Not a Hat and Trio, also known as Nana, Fairy is a game that sounds too mind-numbingly simple to be, well, a game. But when it plays up to 10 players for only $10 in less than 10 minutes, and when it causes your table to quickly erupt in a fiery passion, then Fairy might just be onto something here. Essentially, players are simultaneously revealing a hand gesture to make a bet on which suit will be revealed from the draw pile next. If your bet is correct, then you gain points. If your bet is incorrect, then you lose a point. First person to 15 points wins. I've played Fairy, and somewhat inexplicably, I need more Fairy in my life. I'm excited to see Allplay debut their tiny box line of $10 games in a very small box in 2024 with the likes of Fairy and others. Another game on my list, expected to come in June 2024, is Moonrollers. And Moonrollers is another one that I've played, and I liked it enough that I had to pledge for my own copy. That's because Bitewing Games has had the chance to collaborate with the designer of Moonrollers, Robert Hovakimian, on some upcoming projects, and we've been very impressed with this new designer's output. Moonrollers features spicy push your luck, neat shared incentives, and is strongly influenced by Reiner Knizia's design philosophy. And you know I can't get enough of Knizia-esque games. Most importantly, Moonrollers keeps the focus on dice-chucking drama like my favorite dice games. Next game on my list should be a real big one, Undaunted 2200 Callisto, expected to release in September of this year. Undaunted is the bee's knees of snappy, tense, streamlined war games. But up to this point, it has spent all of its time in the World War II setting. In 2024, it finally breaks free of those confines and goes way off into the future and way out into outer space with Undaunted 2200 Callisto. But this is no simple skin swap where tanks are replaced by mechs and AK-47s are replaced by laser rifles. Knowing David Thompson and Trevor Benjamin, they'll undoubtedly make the sci-fi vehicles and weapons feel bonkers strong. And this box appears to contain 4 double-sided game boards rather than a bunch of modular tiles to make up the map. Plus, the game will offer 2-player, 4-player, and solo options. So I'm excited to see where all of that leads. Another game on my hotly anticipated list should launch on Kickstarter this month and then release by the 3rd quarter of this year. That is Kabuto Sumo Sakura Slam. Long live Kabuto Sumo, the disc-pushing wrestling match between epic bug characters illustrated by Kwanchai Moria. Sakura Slam is not another expansion to Kabuto Sumo. Rather, it is a standalone sequel which I hear will feature a classic square wrestling ring and undoubtedly some new dexterity and physics challenges to enjoy. Also expected to release in September, Kalimala. Kalimala is another reskinned edition of a game I've played and discussed in the past. This one originally hit my table at a time when I was burnt out on beige Euro games with generic themes and presentations, and my initial thoughts on the game certainly reflected that mood. Ultimately, this was one design that I purged from my collection, but I never quite purged from my mind. Something about the bitey gameplay lingered with me, and I'm thrilled to see that it will soon break free of its original look with a new presentation from Ian O'Toole. I'm hoping that this new version will help me uncover a newfound love for the clever Kalimala. Another title expected to launch on Kickstarter in March of this year and then deliver in roughly the 3rd quarter of this year is River Valley Glassworks. Publisher Allplay is on a quest to capture the hearts of Azul fans across the world with their major 2024 release, River Valley Glassworks. Here you'll be drafting glass pieces from a river of flowing tiles and adding that glass to your shop. Some glass types are more rare than others, and part of the strategy is deciding which columns to fill with which types. It already appears to be starting on the right foot with charming artwork from Andrew Bosley and clackety glass tokens which are drawn from the bag and filled across the river tiles. Another game I'm hotly anticipating this year, Night Witches, which has a Kickstarter launch for this year and the publisher is hoping to release it by the end of this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if it spilled over into 2025. Anything with David Thompson's name on it, who is also the co-designer behind Undaunted, Resist, General Orders, and more, is bound to catch my attention, which is why Night Witches is on this list. This solitaire or 2-player cooperative game features the famous female pilots of World War II running missions across a 10-session campaign, where each session lasts about 30 minutes. On top of that, the game will be illustrated by Ian O'Toole, so you can definitely count me in on that. Finally, we're going to wrap this list up with a big teaser for Bitewing Games' next Kickstarter. We're not ready to spill all the beans quite yet, but you better believe we have some major tricks up our sleeve for 2024 and our Kickstarter plans. Hopefully these vague descriptions of our next 3 games will be enough to wet your whistle until we're ready to fully unveil them. So this first nameless title is a modern multi-rondel Euro game with a timeless design ethos of clean systems, tight interaction, and focused scoring. This next nameless game is an old-school shared board tile laying game with a refreshing twist, namely dual-layered placements of tiles and dice. And the last nameless game is a classic Hidden Gem Knizia card game with an evolved rule set, one that removes past flaws while enhancing exciting strategies. I hope you're ready to see these games soon because we're already working on the preview copies with our factory. In fact, the preview copies of one of these games are sitting about 15 feet away from me right now, and they look glorious. So be sure to subscribe to the Bitewing Games newsletter. You can do that through the link in the description of this podcast so you don't miss out on the grand reveal of our next Kickstarter and when it launches. And that's going to do it for my 25 most anticipated board games of 2024. Of course, there are plenty more that will soon be announced that would absolutely be worthy of this list. So typically what I like to do is make a part 2 list in roughly July of this year. At any rate, you can expect to hear more of my thoughts on these games as I get to play them. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Nick Murray, and you've been listening to the Bitewing Games podcast.